Today on the Star Trek Universe podcast, we are beginning our 5-episode mission to explore great classic Trek with Star Trek the Original Series, 205, Amok Time, after these unsanctioned messages from our corporate overlords.
Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast, the podcast where you get to listen in on the continuing Star Trek conversation that two lifelong friends have been having since they were 5 years old. My name's Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
I really enjoyed your intro today, Dave.
Thanks, man.
Our 5-episode mission. I liked it a lot. So this is our first in our series of the top 5 as voted on by Star Trek Universe podcast listeners. Top 5 episodes. We're going to be watching them one a week and covering them here on the cast. I was pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I was among the people who threw in a vote, and I was very tempted to give myself more point power. Because a couple of the ones I wanted didn't get in, but, you know, dims is the breaks.
Dims the breaks. The truth, I did not send one in. Truth be told, I've seen a lot of the original series and I know a lot of it, but like I don't know. I have a really hard time ranking episodes in general, and I couldn't really name which ones are my favorite. So I was like, I'll let the listeners. I did write you and say, put me down for 5 Spock's brains.
I ignored that thusly.
So also, let me mention up top, I don't know if you guys have ever used Scener before, but Scener's this Chrome extension where you can watch something and chat at the same time. So as of now, I'm planning to try to do these, since we're doing these one a week, I'm going to do every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central, I'm going to do the Scener of these episodes that we're watching. So if you guys want to join in, it would be neat. What's the next episode after? We're doing Amok Time today, and what's the next one?
The next episode would be Space Seed.
Ooh, I know that one well.
Yeah,
that'll be great. All right, well, so if you guys want to join next week, we'll be doing Space Seed Thursday, 1 p.m. Central, and I'll put that link in the show notes right here, so you can follow me on Scener and join us, or join me as I watch those.
Yep.
Let's get into Amok Time.
All right, the synopsis that comes to us from Memory Alpha. Suffering through his first infliction upon farr, the Vulcan biological mating urge, Spock must return to Vulcan to marry his betrothed, or he will die. However, when the Enterprise arrives at Vulcan, complications at the ceremony may endanger Captain Kirk as well. And this was the season premiere, by the way, of season 2.
Oh, interesting.
It was the 5th episode in production, but it was the first one they aired.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. I invited people I was like, hey, we're going to be watching the best of Star Trek original series. If you never watched it, this might be a good time to jump in and watch it with me. And then I watched this episode. I was like, maybe this isn't the greatest first episode because it's so steeped in who Spock is as a character. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, look, man, this was the first time we'd seen Vulcans outside of Spock. This was the first time we got the live long and prosper hand gesture. This was a lot of firsts for Vulcans and for Spock.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge episode. I was just thinking, like, if you don't know who Spock is as a logical Vulcan, this episode is an interesting entry point to the series.
I feel like Spock at this point is enough of a
cultural icon.
He's totally enough of a myth or whatever where everyone knows he's very logical and Kirk is not.
Yeah. I agree completely. I liked it a lot. I thought the acting was just wonderful from everybody.
Good.
I thought that Nimoy is very subtle, very good, and Kirk, for as much shit as Shatner gets, I just love how he acts with his eyes And I love some of the like quick change emotions that he can flash across his face so well. When he asks Spock like about, oh, you mean biology as in reproduction, and Spock confirms it, there's just this flash of a laugh on Kirk's face that like is so subtle. It's wonderful because he's trying to take it so seriously, but it's like Kirk always has his inner life. He wears his inner life on his face, but it's very subtle. I love Shatner's acting in this. I think it's so good.
And that conversation between both of them was great for how much subtle emotion was going on.
Absolutely.
Because when he's like, what kind of biology? Just the irritation with Nimoy's like, Vulcan biology. He's just, there's like embarrassment, there's like rage, there's like, there's so much there. There's no need to be embarrassed about it, Mr. Spock. It happens to the birds and the bees. The birds and the bees are not Vulcan.
It's interesting too, like everyone looks at the Vulcans as this like, paragon of logic and like this example to be followed, but this is like, I wrote in my notes, toxic vulculinity. when he's standing before T'Pau and she says, it is said your blood is thin.
Yeah, your Vulcan blood is thin. Are the Vulcan or are the human?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it.
I loved it too. Because he is half human, and I love the subtlety of that too. Like they don't mention he's half human in this, I don't believe. And I guess so. Part of the way through this episode, I was like, why in the world would he not have planned for this? Right? Like why? But then now that I think about it, he is half human, so like maybe he wasn't sure he would experience it the same way, or whatever. I don't know if there's a lot of other half Vulcan, half human in the universe at this point.
That was open to intense debate when Enterprise came out, and Trip and T'Pol had the first half-breed, as they put it. So, yeah, I don't know. People were very attached to the fact that Spock was the first, but I saw no real reason for him to be necessarily. Yeah, he just said I had hoped I would be spared this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's no like, it's never stated, I guess, so it doesn't really, it's not like a problem, but yeah, I can see why people would think that, because it is, I thought he was like the first crew member, or what was he the first? Wasn't he the first like Vulcan crew member on a Federation vessel or something like that? Wasn't there some first like that?
If it's stated anywhere, I don't remember it.
Okay. I seem to have that same memory as well, but I don't remember why I think that.
Yeah.
And given T'Pol, it's like, it seems doubtful, But,
another thing that they sort of pushed forward in Enterprise a whole lot, and they pushed in the original series, definitely, and you can see it here, is Vulcans keep this stuff private. They don't want people to know about it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's intensely embarrassing for them. So, if there had been another half Vulcan, half human, and they did go through Ponfar.
Or a full Vulcan. Who knows? Maybe that other half Vulcan lived on Vulcan.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, who would know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what I'm getting at, I guess. Like, this, I feel like, is an episode where we really get the idea that, like, this Vulcan, help me out, is it Kolinar? That's their religion, right?
Well, the Kolinar discipline is when they, it's a very specific, it's a very specific
ceremony.
Thing. Like
what's the religion called? They have like an overarching thing they call the religion, right?
They just believe in the teachings of Surak.
Okay.
But, as far as the Kolinar, that's a specific discipline that I get the feeling that most Vulcans don't necessarily attain.
Okay.
So it was a really big deal that Spock turned his down, especially being half human, because he sensed V'ger and felt the overwhelming emotion. Like, he was like, nah, this shit's a lie. Something else going on. I gotta go back to Starfleet for a second. in motion picture, but
right. Well, I what I'm getting at is I feel like we get the idea here, the pride of the Vulcans and the sort of like rejecting of like in the shame that they have around Farr. There's a bit of a like lack of logic to that. That's just like more of a denial of truth and denial of their own biology.
Absolutely.
And I find that fascinating, and like very true to the world we live in. I just found it really interesting. And it just seems to be like sort of questioning the idea. I think even at this point when this episode came out, it seems like Spock was getting his own sort of like followers, because there's all these young kids watching like, oh yeah, I'm more logical. Like that's me. I connect with this Spock character. I'm not driven by emotion. And I also find that interesting. Matthew Fox from the Superhero Ethics podcast was doing the live watch with me, and he was like, this episode was why all young teenage boys fell in love with Spock, like they connected with him, because it is like, especially for a kind of a geeky, nerdy teenage boy who like believes themselves more logical, and like then they're fiery, maybe like jockey friends or like people at school, and then they still have this drive, this sexual drive that they like feel ashamed of, and it reminded me. Have you seen any of Big Mouth?
No. I've seen bits and pieces, and it just didn't seem like my kind of thing.
Right. I've only seen a couple episodes, but the sex monster. And like his shame of the sex monster or whatever, like that reminded me of this episode. Farr is like Spock's sex monster that he has to. It's very connected to that sort of Big Mouth idea.
I mean, as pertinent as it is today, it was even more so, I think, in the 60s. And as a teenager, like, how like when up until probably early 30s, whenever I thought of like, the biological call, as one might call it, but especially in teenage years, like it really is like I would just envision Spock over in the corner with his eyes rolled in the back of his head, like he, do not speak with him, Kirk. He is deep in the plaque towel, the blood fever.
Yeah,
that's a pretty apt description. You're just like. It's like, oh, thank God no one's doing a CAT scan of me. There would be nothing but like semen in my brain right now. Just
no, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Adolescent men having that drive for the first time, and like, it overwhelming all of their logic. Like it's such an obvious metaphor. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah. I see it. So thank you, Matthew Fox. That was very good feedback there. It's absolutely correct. But overall, I just thought this episode was cool. I think some of it doesn't really hold up in the, like, some of it doesn't make a lot of sense, like the giving him the drug. So you have this version of Spock that's lost all control, who's ready to murder. And the way that you protect your captain is giving him a thing that makes him fake death. But like, how do you know that's going to fall at the exact right moment? You know what I mean? And it's like, if Kirk had been in on the plan, maybe it would have been better, because he could have like, oh, I'm going to fake my death here and let my whatever. But like, it was a little strange. Like, how do you know Spock's not going to just choke him out a little longer,
Yeah, they didn't. That's why McCoy like ran over as quickly as he did and was just like, it's over or whatever, because they didn't know.
Oh.
Like they only knew that it was a battle to the death, and that the Vulcans would be sated as long as one of them was dead. So as long as he could get over there and stop it, they even hung a lantern on it when Spock came back in sickbay, and they were like, yeah, I don't know. I just snapped out of it. I didn't even want to pring anymore after I killed him.
It's a really weird turn for that, by the way. Like, this whole thing makes sense. And with that sort of metaphor we're talking about, I did not remember that they don't know that the killing of Kirk will get him out of the trance or whatever. Like, because up until that point, it's been explained to them that, like, he has to mate. And he will either mate or he will get a challenger and he will kill and then mate. And that's how he will break Pon farr. And then it turns out you have to either mate or kill. Like, that's such a weird, dark thing. And if you follow that through with the metaphor, it gets a little dark quick.
Oh, yeah.
But it also reminds me of, like, of sociological ideas where they talk about how, like, in certain cultures, one of the things that marks likelihood of war in a culture is marked by, like, an imbalance in the number of women and men. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you can look back in history and, like, when there's not enough women available for men to mate with, more wars happen, supposedly. Like, that's dark. That's real dark. It's like, like, I don't know that that's what they're going for here, but it's like, kind of feels like maybe they were.
Yeah. And it does one of those things where, like, it gives you, it's one of those perfect starting off points, because it gives you just enough information that you can actually, like, throughout decades, and as they have, slowly come up with, like, explore facets, you know, of the mythology, facets of Vulcan biology, you know, their sociology, like what causes them to do certain things. And I you know, as we've seen now in the canon, the Vulcans were one of the most brutal races ever. Like, they were constantly engaged in war until the teachings of Surak brought them to a place of, you know, infinite diversity, infinite combinations, IDIC, you know. They pretty much, they were just like, no, we have to eschew all emotion because we're killing ourselves. This is barbarism.
Yeah, but then there's this drive that they cannot turn away from.
Yeah.
And if they did, their species would cease to exist. So, like, it is literally like a thing you can't, as a culture, completely leave sex drive behind.
Yeah.
I love the end where he talks to T'Pring and says, you know, why don't see the logic? Why did you do this? And she explains her logic, and then he says, that is perfectly logical. And she says, you honor me. It's like, oh man, you guys are valuing logic over everything else is not the way. It's like, I feel like this episode really, like, highlights that, and maybe in a way that, like, at the time, a lot of people loved Spock, and Spock was the breakout character, and they're like, maybe we need to make it clear that logic can get dark sometimes. And, like, the whole point of this show, the whole point, I think, of Star Trek, the original series, is you have this very logical character, and you have the I've said this before, very emotional character of McCoy, and then I don't think that Kirk is the super emotional one. I think Kirk is often the one trying to find the balance, and that's who we are all supposed to be. That's
most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, sure. There's definitely lots of different combinations. Some would say infinite. But in general, that's what they do on this show, and Kirk is supposed to be the sort of the character to look up to, in that he tries to find the balance, and that's what the show is showing us. And I think people had taken it as, like, and they still do. I mean, this Spock is still the character that people glom onto and go, like, yeah, I'm a Vulcan.
Yeah. And, you know, so there's something interesting about Spock is I feel like a lot of people didn't necessarily attach themselves to the notion of him being emotionless so much as him being, as my mom and so many of her generation would put it, cold-blooded. Not necessarily that he's emotionless. He's just a badass. You know, he doesn't smile. He beats ass, you know, if he needs to.
Interesting. I guess I don't think of that as, like, the reason people connect with him. You may be right. And this may be more of today. It may not be as much of then and, like, the kids that were loving Spock. But, like, nowadays it seems like the people that I know that really look up to Spock are the ones that I don't know, they're trying to reach a higher sort of understanding or something through logic, or they want to be, they want to ascend this human realm of, emotion.
Yeah, but if being on Facebook has taught me anything, and just talking to people at work, talking to just various people I run across in my life, dude, Spock was a huge deal. Like, they were trying to fast track this episode to be in the first season, but Theodore Sturgeon takes too long to write, so it wound up being second season, but they were trying to fast track it because of how popular Spock is. And was even at the time during production. So, like, he was reaching and he was relatable to more people than just the nerdy logical kids. I've heard so many different people describe him as just like, oh, he's really cool. Oh, he's just a badass. I never considered it that way. But it's interesting. It's just like when you look at Facebook comments, and my God, there are so many like staunch conservatives who love Star Trek, but they love it for like the military shit, and that's what they're all about.
I actually see. Here's the thing. And if you want to get political, which we surely can, want to talk about the political nature of Spock. I actually find Spock is often the more conservative one
in many ways. Yeah,
in many ways, like. Their aesthetics are the opposite of what we think of a liberal and a conservative today. If you look at McCoy and Spock, you would in the aesthetics of today, you would clearly think that Spock is the more like more liberal aesthetic.
He's the other.
Well, not even just that.
Infinite diversity, infinite combinations, all of those like.
And there's definitely that. There's the. Spock is conservative without the current course of the conservative party in our country, which has a lot of racism in it.
Right.
He is the like conservatism by its like nature. The conservatism I kind of grew up with thinking was good is just like the idea that like you don't. It's the needs of the many. That's all it is. It's like we create a system that is best for the most people, and then some people get left behind, but it's the needs of the many. Like that's the whole thing. And then McCoy is the bleeding heart. McCoy is but he looks like he talks and looks like a farm boy, So he like looks like what we think of as a conservative today, and acts
old country doctor.
His accent and everything. Like we just have these aesthetics of what is liberal and conservative. I think they stand apart there, but their ideologies are very much. I would say that Spock is a conservative by like classic views of what conservatism is. Not what it is today, and how it has grown, but like they're often having these conversations, and basically Spock is like, well, we just can't make that decision. We've just got to make the decision that is best for the most people. And McCoy is like, no, we have to make sure the least of us are not left behind, and that is the ideals. Like it, and it's funny to me because I would think the ideals of liberalism as it exists, are actually much more exemplified by McCoy, and it would be interesting if that were the way that we like saw that. Like if McCoy was a like liberal icon.
Yeah, and here's the thing though: is the characters don't fall into those paradigms perfectly. McCoy hates progressiveness. He hates change. He would rather waste fuel flying somewhere than use a transporter. Let's see how it scrambles your atoms.
Now you're talking about progressive versus like holding things back or whatever. Which
I'm looking at party lines and what they tow.
Absolutely. And that's that's exactly what I'm talking about. Was the difference between the classic view of conservatism, which is like whatever small government and shit, versus what it is today, which is like resist change at all costs. And that is very much where that party is today, but it's like, that's not who Spock is for sure. So that part of conservatism is not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. So I guess I'm not surprised. You were saying you're always surprised at like conservatives that love Star Trek or whatever. I don't think they love it for the war. I actually think that they like would very much connect with Spock on many of the things he says,
Yeah, possibly.
The cold logic of the free market, Yes, some people will die, but we will all be more successful. Like that's their idea.
Yeah. And also, Star Trek is an example of, here are tough decisions here to be made. A, more conservative person and a more liberal person, and perhaps a moderate, they all discuss it. And then in 43 minutes, they've figured it out, and they've moved on with their day.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's not how it ever works in real life.
That's the true, like, optimistic ideal behind the show, I think, is the idea that, like, people can be in such disagreement and they can still grow to care for each other and work out actual problems. That is, I wish that we did that more in the real world.
Yeah. But, the original series is also pretty good about, they will get out of a scrap and they'll kind of work things out. And then there's a general attitude among the crew that, well, we haven't figured it out, but we're not perfect, and we'll keep working at it.
Yeah,
we'll see where this hits us in 15 years or whatever it is.
Yep, that's exactly right, and we don't have that today. Anyway, that's not really what this podcast was supposed to be about today. About like how this exactly connects with our world today, but it does, and I mean, so much of Star Trek does. And I love looking at these shows through that lens.
Yeah. Here's a thing that I was very pleased with, because if you recall, T'Pau, a younger version of T'Pau shows up on Enterprise, and I just wanted to go back and look at her and how she acted and how that fit in with what they did on the original series. And, not terribly well, but, you're saying there's 200 years between, if I'm in a new place for a weekend, my accent changes. So that's fine. What was interesting is we saw a number of Vulcans on this Enterprise clip that I was watching, and some of them were fairly emotive. And I remember that was a big criticism of Enterprise. And sure enough, I went down in the comments and tons of people complaining about Vulcans being emotive. Mm-hmm. And it was just made me think, like, man, T'Pau, who is like, as Kirk described her, all of Vulcan in one package. Mm-hmm. Downright just, she seemed pissed.
They're
such
super
a fair
emotive.
amount. Yeah, she was like absolutely pissed through a number of times in this episode where she's just like, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'll forgive one outrage. That's it.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think this is the sense we get definitely on Enterprise, and here is maybe the first glimmer of it, is that the Vulcans think of themselves as all logical, but sometimes it's just a way of masking their own emotions.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. It really makes me wonder, like, what some of the writers were doing on that political spectrum we're talking about, because, like, a lot of this seems like just a direct, scathing indictment of, like, conservatism, honestly. Like, that's what a lot of this feels like. It's like, we only believe in logic and what is best for the world to function best. It's not about what we want. But then when really pushed, they're like, don't mess up our culture. Like, that's, yeah. And, like, I wonder how much of that was actually at play, or how much I'm, like, putting on that, or how much of that is just, like, in our nature as beings to have, like, to tell ourselves the story that we are,
I think they were putting as much of it in as they could while getting away with it on network television.
Right.
I think they're absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I mean, that, it might be revisionist history on their part, but that's what pretty much everyone says who worked on the show.
Gotcha.
So, I don't know. By the way, can I say how great it is? Like, when you were talking about this earlier, and I wanted to bring it up. When Spock when T'Pring gives her whole reasoning behind what she did, the way Spock says logical, flawlessly logical, there's so much contempt behind him saying it.
Interesting. I didn't get contempt. That's interesting.
It felt like utter disgust.
Huh.
And then he steps over, after she says, "You honor me," he steps over and tells Stonn, "After a time, you may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting. What? It is not logical, but it is often true." Like, that's like...
What a bitch.
Yes.
I had that written in my notes, too. I love that line so much. I did not take the logical as him having a lot of seething emotions about it. I guess I was just thinking he was still kind of coming down from his blood fever. But, like, yeah, that line of him turning around is such a, like... well, fuck you too. Like, that moment is so great.
Him moving over to Stonn and saying that shit. That is like Spock's very logical, very composed, metered response. But translated, it's, "Did you see what this bitch just did?
Yeah.
That's what you have to deal with now."
Having is not as pleasing a thing as wanting.
I loved it.
It's not only specifically to her, it was also like, here we go getting into today's politics again. Man, we're getting political today. But this is very much a incel. This is like Spock being the first incel. Because I don't think it is.
It's not involuntary, though. He's got Nurse Chapel at his beck and call.
Yeah, the Nurse Chapel thing was interesting. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they were going for there. Yes, she seems to have a thing for him, but it also seemed like she was just being an emotional woman mad at him for throwing soup at her. Like, it was really, that scene is super weird. Okay, but my point is, like, he's not just giving an indictment of her actions. He kind of gives an indictment of marriage in general, like the having, the whole having is not as pleasing as wanting thing. It's like, your desires to be together and are not going to work out because marriage always sucks. It's kind of like what he does at the end. And it's very, very funny to me, and like very incel-y. Like, I've been turned down, and now I believe that marriage is all flawed and all relationships are flawed.
See, I didn't get that. What I got specifically was, you did all this and made me kill my captain. All right, yeah, your plan was logical, but it wasn't ethical. He didn't say that to her. He instead goes to Stonn and says, basically, she a trifling hoe, and she is gonna screw you over if you guys don't line up exactly. Like, she is methodical. So, like, that's how I got it. That's how I took it. Like, she is not a good person.
Interesting. I did not take it that way. I took it as him, like, basically being like, "Oh, you don't break up with me, I break up with you," concept of marriage.
Yeah, no, I didn't get that. Like, I don't think Spock didn't want to get married.
Right.
He didn't.
Right. But he was going to, and then when it didn't work out, he like gives this statement about how, I don't know, because he didn't just say like, you should watch out for her. He says like having is better than, or having is not as good as wanting, which means like, yeah, sure, the desire for that seems good, but like, I clearly see what it is like, and I don't want a part of it, is what I don't know. It definitely seems broader than just her to me.
Okay. What do you folks out there think? By the way, talking about Nurse Chapel.
Yeah, please, let's talk about Nurse Chapel.
When he throws that soup bowl and he screams, "It is undignified for a woman to play servant to a man who is not hers."
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, I felt bad for Nurse Chapel through this entire episode, because they treated her like shit.
Sure.
All right. Before she goes into the quarters, she even tries to walk away for a second because she sees them coming and realizes she can't. And McCoy is such a dick. He's like, "You never give up hoping, do you?" That is a shitty thing to say, McCoy. That is a really embarrassing and shitty thing to say. And it would be awful to say if the captain wasn't there.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But the captain was there.
Standing right there. Yeah, they're not kind to Nurse Chapel. That is for sure.
And then she's all happy and shit, like at the end of the episode. When he's back to normal or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, now we're going to talk about man things. Nurse Chapel, please leave the room. And she leaves the room and he's like, all right, so what's the deal with the wedding, Spock? Like, why does she have to leave the room?
I do not know.
I mean, I guess because it's like a private thing with Vulcans, which that's one of my favorite little bits of ridiculousness where like Kirk spends a good 5 or 6 minutes like trying to coax it out of Spock what's going on, and then like the next time we see them, Spock is just like, they're in the turbo lift and Spock is like, I surmise you have deduced what's going on, Doctor. Well, I guess I'll talk in front of you. And he's just like pretty open about what's going on because he assumed that Dr. McCoy had figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's pretty like the whole treatment of Nurse Chapel in this episode as a character, not treatment.
Yeah.
Like treatment by the character, sure, but as a character, like you don't even get a sense of what she like. I guess you get the sense she likes Spock, but it feels very like.
Yeah, that was a thing from other episodes.
Okay.
I can't remember if this was the first time that they actually brought it up, or if it came before, because I don't generally remember things in order because of how screwed up everything is.
Right. Seen it all so many different ways.
Well, there's that, and also the production orders were really, really aired out of whack.
Right.
And I can't remember where they all fall. I have a shitty memory. Everybody who listens to my podcast knows that I don't remember. Like,
yeah, I'm with you.
Effie messaged me today and was like, oh man, I love the blah, blah, blah. And I was like, the what now? The episode you just released yesterday.
Oh man, I'm so bad with that too. Like people will be like, this inside joke, right? And I'm like, am I inside of that? Like you? And they're like, you made the joke, Matt.
Yep.
That was your joke.
Yeah.
It's just different. Somehow it's different when you're like viscerally in the middle of doing a podcast and you're like making jokes, throwing things off. You're sort of focused on you're focused on 14 different things like recording software and like keeping the ball in the air and making sure you get to the next segment and like deciding when it's time to move on. Like all this stuff is constantly in your head. And so like you make a throwaway joke and someone else is like, that was hilarious. And they get to like dwell on it while you're thinking about 3 other things. It's very flattering, honestly,
yeah.
but it is hard for the memories.
Yeah. No. Oh yeah. I had forgotten what the actual story was. But yeah, no, it relates to Star Trek. Effie messaged me and said, oh man, I love the porn story. And like, I had woke up with that message and I was like, porn story? Was that a thing I meant to cut out? What would the porn story be? And and finally I was like, do what now? And she goes, oh, the Star Trek thing. And I was like, oh, right. Because we were talking about like how like R-rated movies, because a lot of the older DC fans are upset for some reason that the Snyder Cut's going to be rated R. And a bunch of people are calling for there to be like a PG-13 cut. And
it's so funny. Let's finally give this director his vision, but we want the vision in a cleaner way than he would do it.
It's not the actual people who were calling for the vision who were wanting this. Like,
sure. You've got a PG-13 version. It's fine. It's there.
Yes, it was in the theater.
They should do that. They should troll them and be like, all right, and we're playing it in PG-13 at 10 p.m. or whatever. Like,
right.
They just play the original theatrical cut.
Oh man, I mean, it's just there have been so many people like talking about like, oh my poor, like I'm going to have to explain to my child why they can't watch the R-rated Batman movie. I'm like, yeah, but you got like a million other Batman movies. Mm-hmm. Screw off, dude.
Also, is the Batman going to be rated R? Do we know yet?
We don't know.
It seems like it looks rated R. But I don't know.
Looks rated R, but I doubt it will be. But yeah, no. So I was talking about like how several years ago now, some porn company put out a Next Generation porn parody, except they were actual fans.
Oh, right.
So they wrote like an actual good story that like picked up threads from the show that they had dropped and stuff. And like, so like, and it wound up like, I remember there were like porn fans complaining that like the sex scenes just kind of seemed thrown in there. But it was because like they put out a party version that had the sex scenes excised. And I downloaded that version and watched it. And I was like, God, I wish this was canon. This is so good.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, anything else you want to discuss about Amok Time before we head out?
I get a little choked up when T'Pau tells Spock, "Live long and prosper, Spock," and he says, "I shall do neither. I have killed my captain and my friend."
Yeah.
That's always such a great bit. And you can like, Nimoy does such a fantastic job of like, there's a reason that it's hard for me to accept anyone who's not Nimoy playing Spock, because Nimoy just had it, dude. Like he figured it out and he just made it work in a way that I've never seen anyone else do. And I've never seen any other person, except for maybe Mark Leonard, who played Sarek, really play a Vulcan in a way that I believed. Like, I've always just kind of been like, yep, that's a person playing a Vulcan.
Interesting.
And it's always just this like deadpan, emotionless caricature for everyone but Nimoy and Mark Leonard, I feel like. And maybe that's just me, but that's how I feel. It is what it is, you know. So we got a little bit of. I did put together a little bit of trivia.
Oh, cool. I did remember one thing I didn't mention.
Sure.
The knife in his hand at the beginning of the episode is so creepy. Like,
it's super creepy.
It's so great. And it's the first real clue of what's going on. And man, I just thought that was really interesting, especially given the fact that it turns out the violence that ends up happening isn't really, he doesn't know at that point that that's the point. Apparently, right. Vulcans just either need to have sex or be very violent once every 7 years. And so I just thought that was really interesting that he's holding the knife behind his back throughout the, like, it's very threatening and ominous. I thought that was neat.
A great bit of foreshadowing, as, you know, since he's facing Kirk, but he's got it behind his back. And you just love how he's shaking, and it's just like, just showing how he's not steady. And then when he does steady himself, he's got the other hand clutching it. So it's like, yeah, a lot of little subtleties with Nimoy, man. He does such a good job.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Like I said before, this was the first iteration. This is the first time we've ever seen the Vulcan salute. This was like,
from now on, that's going to be my official canon reaction whenever someone says "live long and prosper." I will do neither. I've killed my captain and my friend.
I think it every time someone says it. I really do.
It's really funny.
This is the first time we see that this is like the precedent set where all Vulcans, or most female Vulcans, have a name that starts with T. As we get to T'Pau, to Pring, then later to Paul, it goes on. At one point, Kirk says to Spock, "You have been called the best first officer in the fleet," and it was McCoy who called him that in Operation Annihilate, which I tried very hard to get on my list, but couldn't. Man, it's so hard to do 5. It's so hard.
Oh, I'm sure.
Not so hard to do the worst, though.
Looking forward to that.
Me and my sister were just like going off like, this one's bad. This one's awful. Oh, what about this one? Oh no.
We'll see when Picard season 5 starts, and we'll see what we want to do after these best 5 episodes.
Picard season 5.
I'm sorry, season 2, and then see when they want to do these top 5 episodes. Sorry, man. I am,
It's okay, man.
Having a hard time. Just having a hard time.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
Lawrence Montaigne, who played Stonn, he was previously the Romulan Decius in Balance of Terror.
Oh, interesting. I thought he looked familiar.
By the way, the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror was Mark Leonard, who goes on to play Sarek.
That's right.
Spock's father.
That's right. That's funny because you've got that aspect of the Romulans in Balance of Terror,
Mm-hmm.
and then you jump forward to TNG, and you have Balance of Terror Part 2, where you meet the Romulans for the first time, right? It's not called Balance of Terror Part 2.
Right,
I'm just joking. It's called like...
yeah, they do a thing where they're like, we haven't seen the Romulans in 80 years.
Yeah, and then they bump into the Romulans again, and they see them, and the actor who plays that Romulan goes on to play Gul Dukat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just interesting that three of the first 4 Romulans we see in many, many years or whatever end up being major players on the stage later in Trek.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a time-honored tradition to keep bringing people back. Like,
oh, for sure.
William Campbell, who played Trelane in The Squire of Gothos, went on to be Captain Koloth in Trouble with Tribbles and subsequent episodes of DS9.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the first Ferengi you see is Armin Shimmerman. He established what a Ferengi is, and then he goes on to change that drastically for Quark.
Yeah.
It's just neat how these characters come in for one time and they're like, yeah, we need another Ferengi. And they're like, just get that one we used before.
And of course, I think the master of all of it is Jeffrey Combs, who's been like several characters in every series but the original series.
For sure.
So, but yeah, this Lawrence Montaigne, who played Stonn, apparently he was considered to replace Nimoy in the role of Spock if Nimoy chose not to return for the second season.
Wow.
There was a big legal battle concerning his salary. Supposedly, well, not supposedly, Nimoy came back and Montaigne ended up getting this as a guest spot.
Huh.
But his contract specified an option for returning in case Nimoy would change his mind. So, yeah. This is apparently the first episode where Spock is actually Commander Spock, because it says it on his nameplate outside of his quarters. Previously, he was Lieutenant Commander Spock.
Okay. So he got a off-season promotion. I wonder if that was part of the legal battles. Like, he's like, Leonard Nimoy's like, okay, fine, I'll come back for this much money, but I'm a commander now.
Yeah. The Romulan helmets from Balance of Terror were reused by the Vulcans who were shaking the bells,
Yeah. I love that kind of stuff. I love the sets they reuse over and over in Trek. They just like keep redressing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of that stuff. Like, I didn't include all of it, but there's stuff from the that's in Spock's quarters that's reused in several episodes and whatnot. So I always dig that kind of stuff. And one of my favorite things, their Sci-Fi Channel aired, it was for the first time in, I don't know, 25 years or so at the time, or 30 years, that episodes had been aired in their complete form. And it was a big Sci-Fi Channel thing for a long time. And they would have these little vignettes in between, like in the commercial breaks, called Inside Trek, and they would talk about the episode that they were airing. And I just loved hearing the production designers and stuff talk about how little money they had and how they would just like need stuff to go on a wall. And they found some printers, and it was like the first time printers had come with styrofoam, like molded styrofoam in the boxes. And they like stole all the styrofoam out of the garbage can and spray painted them and like put them on a wall. So a lot of shit you see on the wall is just like styrofoam printer containers,
That's crazy.
And there's like, oh no, some kind of technology on the wall. they went to the commissary at some point and just got like a bunch of like coffee lids and spray painted them different colors and stuck them on the wall, and they just look like dials, like futuristic dials.
That's so cool.
I love that kind of stuff. It's something Star Trek has lost, I feel like. Maybe for the better, but I love the imagination of good practical effects.
Yeah.
Of good, cheap, shoestring practical effects.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yeah, there's just something really attractive about the idea of just like a crew with almost no budget making something work. It like makes you just root for that crew as if they're the protagonist of the story, you know?
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Super
I think
fun.
so.
Yeah. And that's why we pretend to be a very small podcast when really we are, you know,
very small.
Very, very small. We don't want you to know how small we are because, you know, we want you to think we have a chance. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. Amok Time, everybody. Good episode of that original series, that classic original series stuff. Hope you all enjoyed it. We know we did. And Dave, I love you, man.
I love you too, buddy. Well,
good.
What's happening?
Oh, you know, just letting you know I love you.
Yeah. Oh, can I say this real quick?
Yeah.
The scene on the bridge.
Yeah.
When they're like, "Oh, who is she?" And Spock goes, "To bring my wife." And then they do like three really close ups, like really super close ups.
Really dramatic music.
Yeah. My wife goes, "To pring? To wife? To hail?"
Thank you for that, Bethany. Thank you. Oh, it's so good. All right, guys. Well, we'll be back soon. We are the Star Trek Universe podcast. You know, find us online. stucast.com.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Or I think it's StarTrekUcast.com.
Oh, StarTrekUcast.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Space Seed next week.
Yeah, Space Seed. Thursday, 1 p.m. Central. I'll be doing it on Scener. I'll try to make sure we have that up on StarTrekUcast.com.
Yeah.
Or it'll be on our page at strandedpanda.com. I'll put a little thing up about that.
I'm giving you notice. Get your feedback in for this episode. Get your feedback in for Space Seed. Talking to you, Stu.
Specifically, Stu. Get your feedback in.
Well, he one time told me I didn't do a good job of, you know, letting people know when we're about to record. And I do a really shitty job of that with this podcast because we don't ever know when we're about to record.
Yeah, well, when there's not content on, we always intend
even when there is.
That's true. We were pretty consistent this year with either Wednesday or Thursday.
It's our fault, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, fully our fault. Everything is our fault. But you can send in feedback at any time. And next week is going to be Space Seed, and Thursday, 1 p.m. Central, we'll be doing it on Scener. And I'll try to have that both places where you can find my Scener. It's like Scener /Stranded Matt, I think. Scener.com/Stranded Matt.
It sounds like some kind of a, I don't know, pejorative from the 90s or something. Freaking Scener.
Yeah. Freaking Scener. Freaking Sceners with their chucks. All right. I'll put the Scener link in the show notes so you can click right there, whatever app you're using, and follow me. And Scener's fun. All you gotta do is have a Chrome extension, and we can like watch a show together and like have a little chat going. It's fun. All right. Joel on True.
Live long and prosper, and remember, it is undignified for a woman to play servant to a man who is not hers.
I can't leave it there. I don't like it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I disagree with Spock on that one. You play servant to whoever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, you don't have to be married to me. You can still bring me a sandwich.
Oh gosh, no. Took it to a different dark place. Peace. Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.